Okay, we're about at 1 o'clock. And I see Drew, you're here today. Okay. So if there are no objections, I'd like to call the July 19th meeting of the Arkansas School Safety Commission to order. Hope everybody's doing well today. It's a little warm out, to say the least, but it could be tomorrow. So we're kind of lucky that way. Look on the bright side, right? I know many of you had a long distance to travel, and I greatly appreciate taking the time to be here. There are a couple of folks that might not be able to join. Bill Temple. Drew is here for General Rutledge. Lori, your name tag is here. You know how Angela feels about you having your name tag. Thank you, Angela. I know Dr. Hernandez is traveling. Trisha, and I don't know, who do we have? Do we have anybody that's on Zoom?
Yes, ma'am. Supervisor DuBois is on Zoom.
Oh, hey, Joe, how are you?
I'm making it.
You're making it. Okay. Thank you.
I'm here, Doc.
Oh,
Tim
hey,
Helder.
Sheriff Helder.
How you doing?
Doing good. How about you?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Good. What I'd like to do before we get started is I'd like to have a moment of silence for Patrolman Vincent Parks with the Jonesboro Police Department, who died on Sunday during a training exercise. If we could have this moment of silence to honor him and his family and the Alita staff and their families, I would be very appreciative. Thank you. I know the whole, the Jonesboro Police Department, that whole community is very tight up there. And these are always very, very difficult to deal with, but our thoughts and prayers are with each and every one of you. The first thing on the agenda is the approval of our meeting minutes from July 12th. So I'll entertain the motion at the appropriate time.
I move that we accept the minutes.
Director Kane moves that the minutes be accepted. Do I have a second? Director Gary, second. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you all. We have a couple of presentations today, and what's probably going to be a little bit of a discussion, so to speak. Congressman Hill's staff couldn't be here today to talk about the new school safety legislation, so we'll have to do that at a different time. But thanks to a suggestion that was made during the Intelligence and Communication Subcommittee, chaired by Chief Chapman, and Principal Marvin was on there as well, that we thought that it was important that we hear the perspective of at least some students. So we do have a student with us here today. And Marvin, I'm going to let you introduce him. And if you guys want to do it down there, since I'm so far away from you, that would be perfectly fine. We can get him there, or he can come up here where he might be able to, folks might be able to see him better. That'd be great. Come on. Come on down. I'm sorry, I couldn't stop myself. Life's little pleasures, right?
Dr. May, we have 2 additional students on Zoom that.
Oh, we do?
Yes, Courtney was able to get an additional 2 students, so.
Okay, super. Marvin, you can sit over there, sir, if you'd like. Principal Burton. Okay, we're gonna do this. I got short arms, so I'm sorry. But I'm gonna turn mine off. I'll leave mine on for a minute. I think it's pretty evident that everything that we are trying to do is for one important purpose. And that's to make you guys as safe as you can possibly be. So I'm going to ask you this question, and Marvin, if you would introduce, and then we'll have Courtney introduce the students on Zoom. But if you could tell us a little bit about, and this is a very general question, about your feelings about school safety, that would really help us out a lot. Marvin.
Well, I would like to introduce Mr. Amby Braggs. He's a senior at Little Rock Southwest High School. Since the school is this is only 30 in operation, so he's only been in this high school for 2 years. So if you know anything about Southwest, it is approximately 2,100 students. So it's a large high school for the state of Arkansas. So his perspective will be from elementary, middle, and high school, as far as the previous high school in which he attended. Mr. Braggs.
Hello. As he said, I'm Inamdi. Most of my feelings on school safety, especially with a few of the recent events, such as Uvalde and other school shootings and other possible threats that have come up in the news recently, I feel that sometimes school safety does slip. There are certain times where there's a person let in that shouldn't really be let in. There's somebody who's either not on their job, not really too tight on security or something like that, and someone passes through with something that they shouldn't have passed through with. Now, I'm not saying just out anybody because they look suspicious or anything like that, but at the same time, I feel like there should be more vigilant security, more vigilant people on duty that are keeping our students and me safe within our schools, because the children are the future, and to protect them is to protect your future businessmen, your future doctors, your future lawyers. So I feel like, again, that it should tighten up a bit. The security should be a bit more vigilant to prevent things like that from happening to our students.
Courtney.
And on Zoom, we should have Mary Emily Rusinski from a senior at Hamburg High School, and then also Webb Storer, who is a senior at Jonesboro High School. And if you all would like to share your thoughts on school safety.
Yeah, and thank you both very, very much for taking time to be with us also today. And yeah, we'd like to just hear your general thoughts and your feelings about school safety.
Okay, I guess I'll start. I don't think so. Really, right now, most students I know are just scared. Last year at Jonesboro High School, there wasn't a threat to Jonesboro High School, but there was a threat to a JHS, and a lot of students took that as being Jonesboro High School. I think it was Jupiter High School in Florida, but we were all scared, and we had a pretty full lockdown. We had the SWAT team from Jonesboro come in. And so basically, we really just need to find a way to fix this issue and make sure that kids aren't scared when they're in this learning environment. And I think a lot of the issue is it's not just guns, it's not just mental health, but we have to address both of those issues to be able to fully solve this problem that we're seeing in schools today. Because this problem isn't just mental health or guns. Because we see that people have bad mental health across the world, but guns aren't as accessible. And so they're not able to commit the acts that happen in the United States. But also mental health needs to be addressed in the United States because it is a problem, as we've seen with students having low mental health because of high stress and the workload that we're putting on students right now to be able to achieve what they want to achieve.
Awesome. Thank you. Who else is there? There you are.
I'm Mary Emily Rzinski. I'm from Hamburg. That's down southeast in Arkansas. I like to recognize, like, from where I'm from, a lot of people are actors and gun supporters. But with that being said, the school and the classroom is no place for a gun, and we need to install legislation to prevent further tragedies such as ones we've seen way too frequently in the U.S. I think mental health does need to be addressed, but first and foremost, we need to make sure that these people are getting help and ensure that we can continue to feel safe while we're supposed to be learning, and that no longer becomes an issue. So.
Super. So each of you have kind of indicated that there's more that can be done. So why don't you each talk about maybe what you think we could do more that would make you feel safer in your schools?
Okay. Piggybacking off of what Mr. Storer and Mrs. Wierzinski, I hope I'm saying that right, said about mental health, I feel like the institutions in which people are going to for mental health need reform. I was at Boise State earlier this summer, and the legislature came down to talk to us, and I asked one of them a question, and they ended up giving the mic away to another person who didn't really answer my question the right way, or in the way that I expected them to. They kind of dodged it. So again, asking the same question, I feel like there is a problem with a lot of mental health institutions, and people are going there but not getting the right help. They're going there and they're getting medications, or they're getting a therapist that they talk to every day that's a drone, and they go there, they come back, and they're the exact same or even worse sometimes. And it ends up just rolling down into this avalanche of problems that isn't able to be fixed because they started at a place that wasn't fixing. So, yeah, like I said, mental health, I feel like should be reformed.
Do you think there should be more access to mental health resources at
Yes.
school?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It starts at the younger level because there are a lot of parents or grandparents, even those generations of people, they didn't really have a lot of that. You know, I mean, they didn't have the, can you talk to me about how you feel? You know, it was more like a kid should be seen, not heard kind of thing. So when they're not heard for so long, for so many years, then they come and they try to raise another child. They kind of have that mentality stuck there. So they raise that child with that same mentality, and it ends up becoming, again, another avalanche of problems. And it's unable to be fixed because there's mental health, or there's help in places that isn't correct help, that isn't help that can actually
Make a
help.
difference?
Yeah, that can actually make a difference. And they end up just, it turns into more and more. They grow up with these same problems that's been unchecked. They think that it's okay, and then it ends up exploding, and it turns into problems like these, where you have people with depression, you have people with anxieties, you have people with schizophrenia, that end up turning into these criminals that we see, and it could have been stopped if they had just gotten the right help.
Yeah. But even growing up is stressful.
That's true.
You know,
Growing up
I mean,
especially.
you might not be talking about long-term things, but you know, we all have crises,
That's true.
regardless of what age we are.
that is extremely true. Growing up can be extremely hard, especially as a teenager in this society, this generation of, social media and things like that. It gets very stressful, very hard for a teen or for a younger kid even, because now younger kids, people 9, 8 years old have a phone, and they see these things and it just gets worse and worse by the day. There's no checkpoint for it to, be sifted through or stopped. And that's also another problem with a lot of these things. But
Oh, that's great. Mary, why don't you go first this time? And we'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
I feel like putting more mental health resources out would definitely cause a big difference. It would just like give people an opportunity to talk their feelings out in a healthy manner without harming other people. And that's something we all need to work more at making sure people do feel heard and they have a healthy way to get their aggression out and talk about their mental health so that they don't go and harm other people, so that we do feel safer in our schools where we should feel safe. That should be a healthy place for people to go and not worry about getting shot and not worry about dying in the middle of class. Like they should go purely to learn and to grow as both a person and as a intellectual. So.
Yeah. Do you feel there are enough mental health resources at the school that you currently go to?
No, ma'am, I don't. I know that you do need to take into account a budget and the resources you have available, but just coming from where I am, we have one counselor for the entire high school. It's about 400 or 500 kids that one counselor has to try to be vigilant over, and that's just impossible for them. And to put more on their shoulders without the help of their community is just, it's ridiculous, honestly.
Okay. Is it Webb?
Yes, ma'am. It's Webb. So I think that definitely access is an issue, and I agree with both Mary and Amandi. But another issue is stigma. A lot of students are afraid that if they go seek a counselor, if they go seek someone to get help, they're going to either be judged by their peers or judged by other people. And so I think that's a big issue that needs to be addressed. And I do think that we are turning a corner on the stigma around mental health. I think that a lot of my fellow peers are addressing this issue a lot better than previous generations have. But I still think we have a long way to go around the stigma that seeking help means you're crazy, or seeking help means that you have all these issues, but everyone has these issues. We have to address these issues or else they're just going to get worse. And so I think that addressing the stigma and the access will help alleviate this issue, along with addressing the issue of guns, because I think the issue of guns and the issue of mental health will help prevent more kids from needlessly dying.
One of the things that, we've talked about as a group is the possibility of there being a statewide anonymous or confidential reporting system, where if you know somebody that's made a threat, whether it be against themselves or towards somebody else, or if they're bullied, that these sorts of things could be reported. I'd like to get your perspective, and Webb, you're still up. So why don't you go ahead and go first this time?
Okay, so I think an anonymous system would work, but I still think that people are going to be scared of the stigma, because even if it's anonymous, say that person's only bullying that one person, it's hard to say if that person will report it, because sometimes if they're only bullying that one person will think, well, they're going to know it was me that reported them to whoever the authority is, and then they're going to be scared to report it either way. And so really, I'm not sure how to address that issue, but I think that is a good idea, or at least a good start to address that issue. And it's better than the system that we have right now.
Yeah, Mary, you want to go next, please?
Sure. I think that is a really, really good idea. Like just a little bit of work is still better than anything we have now. I do think that Webb was right in saying that people might be a little scared to come forward and report that even anonymously if they're scared of the consequences of coming forward and what that will actually look like. Execution. It's not a bad idea, but there might be better ways to try to employ that rather than an anonymous system where people might falsely report or just not report at all because they are scared of what might happen because of that. But it's not a terrible idea. I do think that would help a little bit at least.
I want to piggyback off of something that she said. It was very
Okay.
brief. She said that there could be false reports. And I feel like that would be the biggest flaw within that plan, where somebody might say something about someone and it wasn't even true. The person could be the most harmless little thing on the planet, you know what I mean? And they say something about them and then they end up getting detained or hurt in that process. And also I feel like the entire plan in and of itself could create a fear within the state with instead of an actual solution.
Because
More
the
of
whole
a
point is about trying to get y'all some help.
right,
And it's not about somebody ratting out
exactly.
on
And-
somebody else. It's about being able to have that opportunity and to build that trust. And I hear all three of you that it is a trust issue.
Right.
Is that we've got to build that trust so that you all know that even if it's a false accusation, that in those types of instances, those won't be played out in the way that you're fearful.
Mhm.
Because the whole intent is to do something to help you all, not to hurt you. So if there are things that we can do, that most certainly would, these sorts of suggestions are most certainly very helpful, because around the country, most of the time when these sort of systems are in place, the calls that come in are about friends who are worried that another friend is going to hurt themselves. And we have one of the highest teen suicide rates in the country. So having another avenue where we can get you all additional help is what we're trying to do.
Okay. I still feel as if even without the trust issue being an issue, there still needs to be a reform somewhere within the institutions, within the help, the people that are helping, the counselors, the therapists. I feel like there should still be a reform, a check somewhere within there, even after the trust issue, because I could trust in your plan. I could trust in the anonymous system. I could be wholeheartedly within it all. But as soon as I go to get help, I could still not get the right help.
Is that more of a stigma?
Yeah, I feel like it is.
Kind of like what Webb was talking about,
Yes,
the stigma associated with that?
yes. The trust plus the stigma plus the, you know what I mean? And it all kind of just adds up and ends up snowballing. It feels like for some people they feel as if there's never going to be an end. There's never going to be a solution. There's never going to be something that's actually correct that's going to change anything within these situations.
Does anybody else want to ask Laura? I'm looking down at you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you, because I do. Hi, can you tell me your first name again?
Inamdi.
Hi, you are, so I really appreciate your coming here and talking with us. I mean, I think all of us could probably come up with things to talk to you about for the next few hours, and I'll try to be brief. So I am the new chair of the psychiatry department at University of Arkansas for medical sciences, and I I just really admire your courage in coming and talking with us. So I have a question about the what you were talking about sometimes kids get help and they go to, you mentioned institutions, and then maybe the help isn't really what they needed and things might even be worse. I just was curious if you could, without getting into details of obviously of any specific cases, but I really want to hear what you mean by that, and when you say institutions, do you mean kids going into the hospital? Do you mean, I don't actually, you mentioned boys state. I don't remember what you said. Oh, something different. Okay. But just, yeah, no, I just been curious what you mean about the kind of help and how we can better help young people. And then that's kind of my first question. My second question would be, is there something, do you think kids would attend something like a peer support? Do you think they would talk more openly with their peers or even maybe peers from other schools? So there isn't maybe, how do we address the stigma from your perspective?
Okay.
Sorry, two questions.
I'm gonna answer your first question with my answer from your second question. Well,
You are going places, kid.
well, so your second question was if they would be more comfortable going to a peer support kind of thing. And I feel like that could go into reforming the institutes if there was more, maybe younger people, maybe people that are actually going through the same problems, people that are their age, you know what I mean? People that I feel like they should be put in, within the same not really box, but the same category so that they could relate to someone. I feel like a therapist should be somebody, or somebody that you can talk to, anybody that you vent to should be somebody that you can relate to, somebody that can actually have a real conversation with you about the problems that you could both maybe even help each other with. So back to your second question, I feel like that would make more sense because myself, I know that if I was talking to maybe Mr. Burden here, I would be less comfortable talking to him about my problems than I would be talking to one of my friends that I've known since middle school, or somebody that even I've just met because going back to what you were saying about Boys State, I went up there and I didn't want to go. I didn't think that I was going to like it, thought that it was going to be boring politics. But I ended up enjoying it because there were people around me that were pretty much the same. We all had interests that were pretty similar. Now there were a few debates that ended up happening, but that was just what was going to happen. There's people that are, that's life. They're different people, but they were people that I could relate to. They all had the exact same thing to say. They were like, man, I didn't even want to come up here at first. I felt like I was going to hate this place, and we all had something similar to relate to each other with. And I made a lot of bonds. I still talk to those guys now. But yeah, I feel like that peer support thing would actually make more sense than anything else that has been happening, honestly.
Mary and Webb, do you all have any thoughts on that issue?
Yeah, I'll talk on it. So basically, I think that the systems that Anamdi was talking about are just the fact that, like, I've heard of friends that have had to go to like mental health, like treatment institutes and stuff. And really they've come back and maybe that they've been treated for some of the problems they've had, but typically they talk about just it not being a good experience for them and they don't feel like it helped their mental health very much. And I'm not saying that the people in these institutions are intentionally trying to ignore the problems of the people that are coming into these places, but I am saying that I feel like without the individualized care that each mental health problem needs, it's hard to address each problem individually when you have hundreds of people in one building and not enough doctors to treat each one of them individually. And so I think that's the system that Anamdi was talking about. And I think that's something that probably needs to be addressed in the state of Arkansas to try to help students with their mental health, because also taking them out of their homes and sending them to a building with other people sometimes can make the situation worse because you're putting them in an environment that they don't know and an environment that scares them. And so they might also just reject some of the treatment in the first place. And then talking about the peer support system, I think the peer support system is a great idea. Again, just the idea of the stigma comes down to it, because a lot of kids I know are just mean. That's something that are judgmental, and that it does happen in high schools. And I'm pretty sure it's happened in high schools for the past 150 years, whenever. And so I think that having this system could help. It's just you've got to break down that stigma that puts up a wall between people that want to go to this and people that feel like they can go to this. Because even if we have this peer support system, there's definitely going to be a bunch of people that feel like they want to or they need to go to this system. But if they have either a home life or friends that have always told them, well, if you cry, you're a baby, or if you cry, or if you have these mental health issues, then you're weak, then it's going to be hard for them to go address these problems, because they're going to be seen as judged, even if the people at these meetings aren't judging them. And so I think that that's part of the stigma that we need to break down about mental health to help address these issues.
Yeah. Mary, your thoughts on any of this, peer support, etc.?
I absolutely love the idea of being able to have a peer support group, just so that it's a little bit more personable to the people that are struggling, or the people that know someone that is struggling with your mental health. Just being able to talk to someone, I feel like, does really go a long way with helping everything. And the idea of a peer support group, I feel, is a lot more accessible to a lot more types of people than just simply like going to an institution where maybe not everyone is getting all of the help that they need, or maybe they don't have the resources to be able to go to a facility and physically get help. I just feel like the support group would tackle a lot of the problems that surrounds that, and it would be a great help to everybody involved.
That's great. I'm gonna change the subject a little bit. You guys were in 2012, 10 years ago. You were like 8 years old, 7, 8 years old. And that's when Sandy Hook happened. And so since then, you've had to do a lot of drills. How do you all feel about those drills? Anamba, you go ahead first.
I've always felt, when I was younger, of course, I was like, man, what are these drills for? And like, this stuff is never going to happen, you know what I mean? But as I've, of course, gotten older and thought about it more, I feel like the drills are necessary, because now every time you hear a fire alarm, you're like, oh crap, I know exactly what to do now. It becomes muscle memory. And you know what I mean? Like, every time we hear the siren, sometimes you forget it's Wednesday at noon and you're like, oh crap, what is that? You know what I mean? What's going to happen?
Yeah.
And again, it's another muscle memory. So I feel like every, what is it, two times a month, if I'm not mistaken, it happens. I feel like that's perfect. That's great, because it's taught kids, even 5, 6 years old, they know what to do. You know what I mean? I have 3 little sisters, and they all know exactly what to do. You know, whenever a siren goes off, whenever an alarm happens. So I feel like those drills, those are very
Those have been
necessary.
very beneficial.
Yeah, very beneficial.
Mary, your thoughts?
I'm gonna agree with what he just said, that they are absolutely necessary to teach our kids to know what to do in the case of an emergency. But also, because they're so like you have them every month practically, that's kind of desensitized a lot of our children into like not realizing like the severity of emergencies and things like that. And I would say it's almost traumatizing to go through, just like teaching, like sitting there in a class and them saying, okay, if someone comes in, we're going to board up the door and we're going to hide in the closet and you can't make a sound. And while that is very useful information to know, it's not something that we should have to know. It's not something that we should have to deal with. Like the very real possibility that I could be sitting in my AP Lang class and someone comes in the door and starts killing my classmates. Like, that's not something that I should have to learn to accept. So,
Webb?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that pretty much completely, is that I believe that I believe that what we're doing is necessary, but I believe that it shouldn't be. I believe that we need to figure out what to do to prevent us from actually having to go through these drills. And while I think that's necessary, because I know that Jonesboro High School had that threat that wasn't actually Jonesboro High School, had it happened and we hadn't had the lockdown drills that we've had since like when we were in kindergarten, it probably would have been much more panicked. I believe we need to figure out the root issue of the cause. And while I think that the lockdown drills are definitely beneficial, it's putting a Band-Aid over something that needs to be addressed a little bit deeper than just the lockdown drills, even though they are beneficial for what we're dealing with right now.
Yeah, and from a technical perspective, what those drills are is those are to help you respond if it happens. But the prevention part of it is the key and critical part that all of you are talking about and that we're talking about as a group. Do you all have a school resource officer on your campuses, or commissioned school security officers on your campuses?
Yes, we have at least one. We have at least one school resource officer, and I've had one in my school, at least in middle school. I remember them in middle school, and I know we have one at the high school. And we have parking lot security at Jonesboro High School just to, keep the parking lot safe, because we have one parking lot. And so I think that, yeah, we do have school resource officers and security, but again, if someone comes in with an AR-15, a school resource officer with a pistol probably isn't going to have enough firepower to stop them from doing the damage that they want to do, if they really are wanting to do that damage to students and teachers and the school as a whole.
Does it make you feel any safer at all? Do the students interact with the school resource officer?
I definitely feel like it makes me feel a little bit safer, because at least there is someone on campus that will have the training to react to a situation like that. It definitely makes me feel a little bit safer. And knowing that there's a person on campus that we can talk to, because at least at Jonesboro High School, our school resource officer is just another person. We can talk to him. And knowing that there's a person that knows the students there that wants to protect us does help with alleviating some of the fears that I have about school.
Okay. Mary, any thoughts on that?
We also have a school resource officer. His name is Mr. Officer Brandon Kelly. He's really sweet. But with that being said, just having one officer does worry me a little bit, because there's only so many places that you can be at once. If there's a shooter in one building and he was in the other one, that does concern me. Like, you can't get there in time. It's just a whole thing. But it does make me feel a little bit easier knowing that there is a professional on campus that could step in if he needed to be. It does make me feel a little bit better about that.
We have, if I'm not mistaken, 1 to 4 of them, and they kind of switch shifts or so. We have multiple security officers. But I also, back to what I was saying about, I think there's 4 of them, if I'm not mistaken, and they all rotate. I think that is a great strategy, because like she was saying, maybe one officer's in one building, maybe another one's in another, and they're either not able to move to where the shooting's happening immediately, and now there's somebody else that's there. So that does definitely make me feel a lot safer, because there's people that are trained and there's people with the strategy. You know what I mean? So that's definitely a great thing.
Awesome. And then my last question, and then I'm going to open it up to the rest of the commission members if there's any other questions. But, when you look back and what we're learning from Uvalde, that, they seemed to be lackadaisical. They didn't have what we call a good culture on safety. They would prop open their doors. They would not, keep their classrooms locked. How do you all feel about making sure that those the exterior doors are always locked and the classroom doors are locked? And trust me, I mean, I'm paining even asking you all these questions because, in the ideal world, we wouldn't have to do that. But I'd like to get your feelings.
Like you said, in a perfect world, we wouldn't have to do these things. But since they are instances, they are circumstances, I feel like locking things up is way better. Like at our schools, we have like the magnetic little key card pads that allow people to come in if they have one. I feel like that is a great thing, a great addition to security, because you can keep doors locked and only people that have access can come in or out. You know what I mean? If you're inside, you can go out with the teacher's permission. If you're outside and you have a key card, you can get in, you know what I mean? Or you can knock. Locking the exterior doors, I feel like is exactly what we need to do. Keeping them locked. Now, there were certain schools that I went to where they would keep master keys and master locks and chains on them. I feel like that's a bit excessive, but in certain situations it could be the difference between life and death. So I understood it, but I also felt like it created an environment in which children would look at it and be like, what is this? You know what I mean? What's going on? Where not necessarily where am I? That's a bit ridiculous, but more like it kind of made them feel like they were stuck. They were in this place and they couldn't get out or in without a certain permission. You know what I mean? And it again, a basic locking, I feel like, is perfect. So the systems in place right now, I feel like, for locking doors and keeping things locked up is exactly what we need.
Yeah, Webb, why don't you go next?
So I agree with Anamdi that this is absolutely something that we need to have. But I feel like a thing with kids is, or at least, like anyone under the age of 18, is you have to tell them why. That classic kid asking why. If you tell the kids, we're doing this because we're scared too. We're doing this because we're trying to protect you, to make sure that we have this safe environment. I feel like it would be much more effective in not making kids worried. Like if you say that we're doing this to try and protect you, to try to make sure that we're safe and have this learning environment, especially with, like, I know we all know why those locks are there. But I can tell you that there's definitely kids at all of our schools that don't know why that they have locks, that have these locks and these safety measures in place. And so I think just transparency about why we're doing the things that we're doing could definitely go a long way in helping people understand and be more safe in what they're doing. And also just locks on teachers' doors. Again, another good idea, just because, like you said, in a perfect world, we wouldn't have to, but right now we have to, because we don't live in a perfect world and we're all scared and we're all trying to figure this out. And so trying to fix the problems at this level is great. But we still have to go deeper and try to fix the problems at a base level and prevent it. So while helping prevent it once it starts happening is great, and it's good, we have to prevent it from a base level to prevent it from happening in the first place.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mary?
I love what Webb was saying about having really open lines of communication and transparency among the students, the teachers, the admin, everybody, just discussing why we are taking these measures, the severity of why we're taking these measures, and what that means on an individual level for every single person in that building, I feel really helpful. And I think it really goes back to the talking about it, having a peer support group. All that really does go hand in hand in talking about these issues in a healthy manner and making sure that everyone understands how to prevent things like this from happening ever again.
Great. I'm just going to say on behalf of myself, I feel so much better about our future, knowing that the three of you are going to be in it. You're all three phenomenal young individuals, and I'm very, very proud of each and every one of you. And thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here. So who else has a question? Anybody else? We covered a lot.
Dr. Mayor,
Crystal, yes, ma'am.
Okay, got it now. It's been outstanding to hear the three of you share your opinions. But what I've kept hearing over and over, go deeper, prevent from the base level, prevention. So I would like to hear your opinions about what that prevention might look like. Do you feel like, for example, there needs to be more teaching about how to process feelings? Or maybe there should be a class. We all know that you've got to have 4 units of English, 5 units of this, that, and whatever, as far as curriculum is concerned. But do you feel like there may need to be changes in curriculum?
Yes, actually. And I've preached this for a while, whereas there should be as much of a focus on academics as there should be on a mental side of everything, because you can't really get your academics without being mentally stable, mentally okay. You can't get all those units of English. You can't get those A's and things like that without, you know what I mean, being in a good mood sometimes. I hate going to English at 8 in the morning, you know what I mean? So I want to be pretty happy when I'm going in, if I'm going to. So yeah, I feel like that changing curriculum would be great, or even classes teaching people how to talk to people, how to ask questions without being bombarding within their own mental space. You know what I mean? And yeah, I feel like that is actually a great point. Changing the curriculum, making it more accessible to the modern society, and changing things, updating things as we progress into the future.
Thank you. Did either of the students on Zoom, if you would like to share your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Anamdi that, yeah, we need to have classes that, or at least some mental health support in schools that allow us to understand what the emotions we're feeling are. Because while some people have great parents that can teach them emotional or healthy emotional habits and healthy emotional processing ways, some people don't. And some people have to take out their emotions on other people, take out their emotions on themselves, and they don't know how to handle this. And so teaching it in schools where it would be required of them to go and to at least sit in an environment where their mental health is the focus would be at least a good first step to actually addressing the issue of mental health in the United States today. And another idea would just be to make guns harder to access. Now, I'm not saying that we have to just take away guns, because that's what a lot of people hear when they say that we have to make guns harder to access. But being able to buy an AR-15 with little to no background check, or a pistol with little to no background check, really isn't a good system to have, because we are able to see people that don't have good mental health, that don't have the safety and knowledge that they need to have to own these weapons, to own these firearms. We're able to see them, access them, and use them in the ways that we've seen at Uvalde and Sandy Hook and Parkland. And we've seen this happen time and time again. And so it's really time to address that issue.
Thank you.
How about Mary?
Yes.
I like the idea of having a class where you would go and talking about healthy ways to manage your emotions and manage all these things you're feeling. And I think that we should, if we did employ that, start basically at pre-K kindergarten and go all the way through 12th grade. I think that introducing these concepts to kids when they're still pretty young would make them more susceptible to learning and growing with that as they age and as they go through the public or private school systems. And that would in turn help combat both school shootings and just violence in general throughout their lives, whether that be like later on down the road or not. All of this just helps diminish the level of violence that we're seeing on a day-to-day basis. And it would help immensely with this conversation. So.
Thank you. Thanks to all three of you.
Okay, let's give these young adults a big round of applause. Thank you, guys. Very much. Do you mind if I give you a hug? You're awesome. Thank you. Wow. 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 Okay. It's hard to go from that to what we're going to go. It's just not a good segue into this. But you know, like I say over and over again, you know, this is all about them. It's all about them, the kids. So you all did get a copy of the Texas House of Representative Interim Report. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through, there's some things on the, at the end, there's the factual conclusions that are critically important, I think. And I want to walk through some of these and I want us to discuss them, not relative to the Uvalde situation, but relative to what we need to do, you know, because we've got to benefit from these situations. The first thing that they talk about are the communication and lockdown alerts. And while they did have, it appears they did have a sufficient amount of time to be able to lock down, that there were some problems with the lockdown being communicated through the emergency alert system that they're using. I'm not an expert on the emergency alert systems, but it's my general understanding, and I need some of you that are more knowledgeable than me on this to speak up, but Wi-Fi is an important part of them being able to implement effectively. And while I know we've got an enormous amount of effort being made in our state to increase the access to broadband, what kind of issue does that create for us, and what's a potential alternative?
Hey, Dr. May, I'll just say that.
Hi, John.
At our school, since the pandemic and the online schooling and stuff, everybody went to devices and kids got used to bringing their phones in. We had a bring your own device network, but kids, there was so much of kids not learning and being distracted by their devices that we've shut down that network now, and they're using school devices, but the teachers were also accessing those devices on their phone, that network on their devices, their phones. Now they don't have access to that either. And the idea was that everybody can get access
On their phone.
on their computers or
okay.
But I don't know if you've gotten this part yet, but one of the things that struck me in this is, I mean, I use Straight Talk. So mine, half the time I'll get texts 2 days late or whatever, group texts that come in out of, so different people have different networks that they use that may or may not be that effective for something like that. but we've talked about layering in our subcommittees numerous times and how that was interpreted in our last report and stuff. This is a prime example to where the layering for just the communicating the lockdown could have
Bingo.
that first resource that they used was not followed up by the simplest, most rudimentary device they had. That was the intercom system.
Yep.
And we have to impose on these people that you can't just depend on one way when you have multiple ways to notify people. That the intercom system could have communicated to everybody.
And all of our schools have intercom systems, correct?
They may or may not all function. I think that's another thing that is.
Well, that's what I'm kind of asking.
Yes.
That's why I'm asking. So who wants to go there? David, you going to help me here?
Well, I would say that most, I'm sure, have some sort of intercom system throughout their buildings, but I can say that Clarksville has had its struggles with different buildings being down for a number of weeks, especially here recently. We've had an issue last year with an intercom system at our elementary school, and it was a lot of supply chain issues as far as getting the components needed to get that intercom system up and going. And so we use runners and lots of other low-tech ways of trying to to communicate with our teachers. Of course, we also use a lot of high-tech stuff where we have Microsoft Teams, and we're all on Schoology, which is a learning management system that goes throughout the district that a lot of communication takes place over there. But as far as that instant grab your attention, there's something going on right now, the intercom absolutely is the best way that I've seen to make that happen. And I don't know if there was an issue. I didn't come across any particular part as far as an issue with the intercom system.
No, they relied on their emergency alert system.
Yeah, which actually we're
And
looking at that.
That's the issue.
We're actually looking at that system in Clarksville too. That it's part of the package also provides you a system where when you have a visitor on campus, that you can scan their driver's license in, and it does actually a background check, and then we'll print a visitor's pass and things. So it's kind of a big package of my understanding of what they were using. But as far as what happened, I can't say.
But I think the point is, and I think John hit it really head on, and it's the layering. You know, we've made philosophically, you know, we talk about, you know, comprehensive school safety strategies. There's not one thing. Well, that applies to everything we do. And while we use the word layering and sometimes limited context, John's right, I think, that layering should apply to everything that we're talking about. So I anticipate, and I don't know, I guess this is going to be in Chief Chapman in intelligence and communication, that we grapple with providing our schools with some additional best practices when it comes to emergency communication. Does anybody here disagree with that? Okay. They also had apparently quite a bit of fatigue from what they were, or emergency alert fatigue, or maybe lockdown fatigue would be a better way to put it, because they had these incidents called bailout, and you know, it's kind of like if you pull the fire alarm too many times, then when you really need to pull the fire alarm and do, then folks aren't going to do what they need to do. Does anybody know of any similar situations that we might have in our state? Before I assume we don't, let me ask that question first, because that seemed pretty unique to their location. Okay. As far as doors and locks are concerned, and we've had some discussion in some of our subcommittees on this, and that's why I wanted to ask the kids, the young adults, how they felt about this particular issue. Some of the conversations we've had have focused around the inconvenience of locking doors. But after reading this report, I'm just going to say this. I think that inconvenience is not as important. So, Tim, you guys are going to have to work on in physical securities. And I don't know, Director Gary, you guys may need to do a little bit of work in audits and EOPs, talking about the importance of locking doors. We do, and one of the things that I haven't done yet, and I will here in a minute, but we've got questions about doors in the assessment that we're about to send out. But it seems painfully clear in this to me is that not only is making sure that the doors are locked when the kids and the staff are present, but the maintenance was a big issue here as well. And so having some sort of system in place to be able to get those locks fixed as soon as possible is critically important. So hopefully you guys will tackle it if we even need a more detailed discussion than that. It's also painfully clear that there was a pattern of them not following their security policies and procedures. And this goes back to the discussion that we've had in several of the subcommittees that focus on creating that culture of school safety, that culture of safety, and that culture of compliance. But I also think the compliance, we can look at it beyond this as well, beyond the individual schools, that we can look at it from the perspective of, as a broad umbrella, what can we do to hold our schools accountable, that they create that culture of safety and that they follow the laws that we've already passed that focus on school safety. So to me, that's an accountability. And this is just my opinion, that we need to most certainly look at because I think it's critically important. They were propping open doors and they just weren't following. And in a situation like that, and I don't know, let me see, we've got Superintendent Hopkins. Who else do we have that's at that level? We don't. Okay, so I'm gonna have to pick on you. Ultimately, whose role is it to ensure that that safety, that there is a culture of safety?
Well, I think I do. I think it falls back to the board and to the superintendent to establish the policies and enforce those policies within the district that creates that sense of urgency with those
Right.
needs in the district. No question about it.
Yeah, because we in our initial the 2018 recommendations, we talked about there being a school safety coordinator on each campus. And to me, when I say campus, I mean like the elementary school, junior high, middle school, and high school. But yet it doesn't look like that's actually being done everywhere, that they may have one person that's responsible for security and safety. But there's a part of me that now thinks that these school safety coordinators are even more important than we thought when we first did our original report. Because in my mind, if you have a person on each campus that's their responsibility, then that's the best place to start. Now, of course, at the superintendent and board level, absolutely. But being able to have one person at each campus that is responsible for helping that strategy be implemented and maintained and so it be compliant, to me would be really important. Other people's thoughts on that? I
Yes.
see Principal Burton wanting to jump in. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. I would like to say on the board level, that's really important that the board has a position on that, but that doesn't actually influence what happens in the schools. that school principal has to be responsible for developing a team and have regular safety meetings with their safety coordinator, with the SROs, with safety and security, with your teachers, emphasizing the importance of all locked doors. Like the student stated, some campuses, the newer campuses, the doors automatically lock, but that's not the case in all schools.
Correct.
So you have to monitor those doors basically in a high school every single block, because in high school, students are going to their vehicles, they're going home, all these different things. So you have to have a system in place where you monitor those doors, especially exterior doors, throughout the day. And that's something that should be indigenous with on the school level, involving a team of persons, because if you have a large comprehensive high school, that's a large building. So you have to have several persons monitoring that, not just one person.
Anybody else? Yeah, John.
Yes, Dr. May, I'll tell you this too, that when we go back to school this fall, most likely security is going to be hard on everybody's mind. Everybody's going to be diligent. Everybody's going to be thinking about it. All the kids are going to come in, they're going to be asking their teachers what we're going to do if a school shooter comes in because of what happened this last month. But 4 years from now, if we don't build this culture, if we don't have that person in charge, then you're going to see the same lack of apathy and stuff. So I think having that school safety coordinator in there, that's something that person, at least that person, will be diligent every day, every week, all the time. And it'll be aggravating to some of the staff and to some of the students. Some of the students will be bored. When you were saying a little while ago about something, anything familiar or similar to the bailouts, in our district, in Valonia, we had 2 tornadoes 3 years apart in 2011 and 2014, not during school, but in my mind, tornadoes are a huge thing. Tornado drills, I take them serious. But I can tell you, as time goes farther and farther and farther from that 2014 tornado, fewer and fewer kids and fewer teachers in that building take them serious. And you see the same strolling and lackadaisical, going through the motions of the drills. And we need somebody in there that is so heavy on their mind, that it's such an important part of their job all the time, that in 4 years, they may be aggravating employees, but those employees are still going to be thinking about a school shooter because they're getting poked and prodded by a safety coordinator.
Yes, Chief. And then Lori, I'll go to you next, ma'am.
So as much a question as a statement, I'm assuming that in a lot of our smaller schools, I understand Little Rock is probably large enough to have a full-time safety coordinator, a team. But in some of our smaller schools, is that typically a part-time position, a secondary role? And should it be a recommendation of this committee that become a full-time position? When that position is passed from person to person, it loses the luster. So it's as much of a question, I guess, for the schools. And is it important for that to be a full-time position? At the district level, for sure. But having that person that is their job, like you said, John, it's important that they understand the importance of that. Because I believe in a lot of the smaller schools, it's probably a secondary position. Is that correct?
It would be kind of like our commissioned school security officers. You got a person that they're hired, their employment contract is for an English teacher or a computer tech room operator. And but they would also be charged with that additional duty of being a safety coordinator for that campus. Along the lines of that, I mean, it goes back to accountability and trying to build a system of accountability in. And I totally agree and think that we need that, because it is easy to be complacent, especially the longer you get away from those, because I've seen the cycle myself. We put our program in place back at Sandy Hook, and then when Parkland rolled around, phone blows up. What are you guys doing at Clarksville? We've read some things about you, and so you go through that, and then Uvalde, Texas, obviously the same cycle. It quietens down, then it builds back up. And so in my mind, we need to find some way in the state to provide support to our schools to keep this on the front burner. But yet it's a double-edged sword when you talk about accountability with school security, because if it's some sort of a public record or public knowledge of that, well, then go down the list. Which school has the least amount of security in the state? is.
Yeah, no, we don't want to do that.
Do what? Oh, okay.
That was Zoom talking to you. You didn't
All
know
right.
that after all the Zoom meetings you've probably been in.
She sounded familiar. I just
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things, and Lori, I haven't forgotten about you, that one of the things that we've, talked about, I don't know whether it was in the full commission or in some of the subcommittee meetings, but being able to have potential for stipends for folks that are in that position, because there needs to be, I think what I'm hearing Chief Chapman say, if it's your job, it's your livelihood, to have some at least incentive for them to be able to do it. But I realize that that's a funding challenge, but to say the least, but that would at least be one thing to suggest.
But it's also having a subject matter expert, having somebody that truly knows that is their
Yes.
job, having the understanding of what physical security looks like, as well as cybersecurity, and understanding that. So I guess that was more of my point. Is it important enough to our school districts, to us as a commission, that it not be a secondary function, that it's not a part-time position, because those part-time positions may roll to a different person every other year.
Yeah.
And you do lose some of that expertise and the ability to focus on that particular subject.
And it's those smaller,
Mhm.
poorer schools that I worry about most.
Well, it's the concentration of, like, is it in every building? Is it at the district level? Because obviously finance is a huge
Big
question
deal.
mark
Yeah.
with all that. And, some of the conversations I've had recently about this is that perhaps at the co-op level, there could be some sort of an expert in our co-ops that work with our local schools. And I'm kind of going back to our model that
Well,
we
it could
have.
also be, could also be statewide too.
I guess. I mean, what I'm saying though is that it doesn't need to be diluted out to the point where you got one or two people that's responsible for the state.
Sure, I
It needs-
completely
And
agree with
that's
you.
what I'm just saying, as far as a co-op division, you've got 10, 15 school districts per co-op. If each one of those, and that's just the way we've got it divided out. So just upon that division, that number of schools could have a person that was their mission. They were a security professional.
But I think, and I think as far as getting information on that, that's a slightly different issue, and we could have another conversation about it. But I think that if you're what Chief Chapman is talking about is the person at the school that's going to be responsible for ensuring that that culture of safety is in place. That's not going to be somebody from outside the school. It's going to be somebody inside.
Yes, but
that
I
school.
think the question is what level of expertise that individual has in their background. I mean, is that a person you tap at school and train up at the school? What kind of funding would be available for that individual within that school? And so the question is, this expert, at what level do you have that expert? Is it serving multiple schools? Is it serving one district? Is it serving schools, individual schools within the district?
Yeah. Lori, now you're not ready. You're always ready.
Totally a different train of thought. So when we talk about our culture and just kind of thinking about what our students shared with us, I think it's really important, especially from middle school up, that when we do these things and we talk about, we're going to really focus on making sure our doors stay locked, and we're going to make sure that we're focused on safety, that our students understand that as well. Because students walking by the door, they see an adult coming toward the door with their hands full, they're going to tend to open that door for the adult, right? Because they're good kids. We need to make sure that they understand as well that we don't open exterior doors for anyone. They have to go through the office or the front entrance or whatever, that they understand, and they see the teachers modeling that behavior so that they thoroughly understand when we say we're keeping you safe, this is what it looks like. And we don't open doors for anybody. They must come in through the front or whatever that protocol is.
Make it age appropriate.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And that's a good segue to the information about the attacker. And I was very not surprised by any stretch of the imagination, but he lived in sounds like a very difficult home environment with a mother struggling from a substance abuse disorder. Kids, I know, I've worked on this for 15 years. Kids that live in homes where there are illicit drug activities in the home are challenged in so many ways, and they're at risk of so many different things, physical abuse, sexual abuse, and mostly neglect. And it can take a tremendous toll. Doesn't always have to, but it most certainly can. When I read this home and family part, and then I read the school part, it made me think about the all the information, Courtney, that schools have, you know, the database that we talked about, and the being able to identify at-risk students. And when I hear about what these young, older kids told us, I'm going to call them young adults, I'm sorry. But it's important that they know, and that they feel like, you know, the prevention piece of it. And when I think about the at-risk database and the potential of that, is that we're trying to accomplish some of the things that they just told us earlier that they wanted us to try to accomplish. There were folks that knew. There were so many communication places where his family knew. They actually told him when he bought those guns after his birthday that, nope, can't bring those. I don't want those guns in my house. He had interactions, and Principal Burton, I'm going to put you on the spot again too. Social media, the monitoring, social media didn't pick up on this. And they had a system at their school, but the system doesn't go beyond whatever device the school has, correct? But you're also part of Intel and Communications. The other question I have, because I know Texas is see something, say something state. Why didn't the social media somewhere that become a red flag, other than focusing on, well, the company, we reported it to the company, and the company didn't, the company didn't do anything about it?
Well, I would just say evidently that the way the social media, whatever company that they utilized, did not have the right, lack of a better word, words tagged, phrased in there, so that the components would not be able to pick it up in a way that would trigger the school. And whatever system of notification, it has to be layered, as we talked about. Not only do you call, send emails, various correspondence to the persons who need to respond to that or act and accordingly to that. So evidently the system failed in its communication to the school, some level of notification regarding this student, because there should have been more safety nets in place to notify.
Great phrase. Yes, safety nets, because he apparently had quite missed a lot of school.
Correct.
And that's why I'm talking about these pieces of data that we can pick up to help us identify these kids at risk. But, you know, I can't imagine a program, and I guess we'd have to see the original posts,
yes, to
see how that wasn't detected that this kid was going to shoot up a school.
Correct. And that, I mean, from attendance, from the students' attendance, from failing grades, to the system that we use in our data dashboard in the state of Arkansas, there that must have been other indicators of that this kid was in trouble. And none of that was actually executed based on this report to help the school identify and have some level of
no, I agree. I think that's something our mental health and prevention group is going to have to tackle with. Dr. Dunn?
Well, so even if he had been, okay, so if we had a kid like this and we had a way to flag the kid, then what? Then what? I mean, this is a general question. Where, what, and part of it's a legal question too. So what could legally be done and by whom and whose responsibility is it to do that? A very broad question, I realize.
I
but
can
don't
speak
think-
as far as the school superintendent dealing with issues like this at a school. You know, over the years, we've dealt with situations where kids have terroristic threatening, said alarming things. And the district has expelled students for this behavior, especially when it can be related to the school itself. And we have seen students go to receive counseling services and other help in that nature. But typically what we see happen is someone will go to a residential facility, maybe for 10 days. And my best guess is there's an amount of money that's provided federally that would pay for X amount of days stay. And then at the end of that, when that money's gone, well, they're out. And when you go back and look at Parkland, and I'm not sure exactly the situation there, but I know the student was expelled and they had issues.
Yep.
And so you get it to the point that if you've got a student, my hands are kind of tied as far as medically trying to get them help. And all I can do is put them out of school. And at Parkland, that's what had happened. That student had been expelled, but yet came back to school
Yeah,
with his gun.
That's my worry. Courtney, you were going to say something.
Yeah, so because that was one of the major things that jumped out at me is where it said the school made no meaningful intervention before he was involuntarily withdrawn for poor academic performance and excessive absences. So we do have a state law that says you cannot use exclusionary discipline for truancy issues. And again, according to this information, he had no other prior disciplinary issues except for one fight. So from this information, I don't see where there would have been a basis for expulsion. We do have laws in Arkansas that say even if a student is expelled, the school district has to continue to provide access at least to some sort of academic virtual instruction, something. They have to offer that to the student even if they expel them. But even before that point, we also have laws that require school districts to have an alternative education program, and that if they demonstrate those characteristics like excessive absences, unstable home life, and maybe no one at the school knew that about him, but even just the struggling academically and the excessive absences, I think are initial signals that a school district would look at to dig further and to see if their alternative education program was appropriate. And that is typically in a school district where those mental health services are provided,
Right.
or at least the avenue where they direct them through the alternative education program. So I feel like legally we do have some things in place already that would not have led to a situation like this,
Right.
but obviously there's still room for improvement.
Right. And being able to see that kid going forward, it's not like, okay, you have the situation, we do these things and then, okay, you're gone. They would be followed for a longer period of time. Yes, sir.
So based on the report, it doesn't appear that this young student or this the shooter was advertising on school devices. And
Correct.
so from a law enforcement standpoint, I'll tell you right now, and I don't mind saying it, our social media networks are one of the most uncooperative companies, the vendors. They are very difficult to deal with. So the lack of reporting from whatever social media app does not surprise me a bit. That is, I mean, they do want a big brother a lot of things, but these type things go unmonitored quite often. So Little Rock has a great system. We'll talk about that a little bit in our committee report, but he was advertising what he was doing on normal, a dozen different social media platforms, and they're very difficult for us from a law enforcement standpoint to deal with.
And that's what I was trying to get at a little bit earlier with Marvin, is that it's like with fusion centers. Are they not looking at this kind of material?
I think you're starting to see agencies that are capable of employing criminal analysts, intelligence specialists, that there are systems out there that we can do that. that we can do something similar to what the school districts are doing and monitor certain social media platforms. But again, they're so vast.
Right.
And again, it's so expensive.
Did we not have a presentation during when they did the Fusion Center and they talked about some software that's available out there?
But again, how do you hone in on that singular person in a state the size of Texas? It's very difficult. We have to do a better job at that. If we're depending on these social media companies to do it for us, we're missing the boat.
Yeah,
And
but
so we
there
have
were
to put
also
it-
individuals here too that knew full well what he was saying and didn't think that it was important and didn't think it was important to report, even in a state that is very strong and see something, say something.
Absolutely. But that goes back to what our students just told us, that stigma of reporting. That's a culture that we live in. It's not just with our children, but it's with our adults. There is a stigma that goes along with telling and saying those things, and we've got to change that.
Yeah. Paula.
So I know when we had the presentation from Miss Marble, she said something about a multidisciplinary team.
Yep.
And so I keep going back to that in my mind because you're exactly right. What happens, Medicaid often pays for those psychiatric institutional settings, right? So they go, we are the payer, we are paying for that. There's a point in which they can't stay there forever. And then they come back to the school, and they always come back to the school. And the treatment that's provided isn't, like a one shot. People don't go to places and get fixed any more than they really go to a counseling session and get fixed. And so that whole multidisciplinary team approach, I think, is really important because it's, as Dr. Dunn said, what do we do? And if we just say, oh, we've identified them and we think that they have a mental health issue and we're going to refer them out to whatever level of counseling. Well, somebody else is probably going to make that decision about where they go, what level of care they get, how long they stay there, and then they're going to come back. So, thinking about that multidisciplinary team approach, which is that there's a mental health person on that team, but they're not the only team member. And so you're talking about this and seeing what that student needs. Keeps coming back to me that if we keep doing that, refer out, when we identify someone, that I don't think we're going to get the results we want from mental health.
So you like, if I hear you correctly, you like this concept of the multidisciplinary team, whether it's, in the example of Cindy Marble, it was on the behavioral threat assessment teams. But you think that can be useful in other circumstances as well, if I hear you correctly.
Yes, I think if you do that identification of the student who has some sort of need, then bringing in that team that is looking at that need across.
Gotcha.
And so they're coming back and reporting. I saw it. The other place where we have a multidisciplinary team, and that's probably why it stuck with me, is I worked for the Commission on Child Abuse, Rape, and Domestic Violence before I came here. Back to DHS. And so they have a multidisciplinary team approach too. And their multidisciplinary team was the same really kind of group that would be here, but their multidisciplinary team got a feed of every priority 1 and 2 child abuse case. And then they have a team of people that meet led by a coordinator, and it is mental health, school personnel, local law enforcement, and they really dig into that case to say, okay, we've seen this family before, or we know what's going on with the sibling, and then connecting them to those counseling services, following up with the family, making sure, because just because they get referred to counseling services doesn't mean the family's going to follow up and be involved. And so that team really worked well.
But they don't really do all the cases. There are some cases that they do that way.
That is right. They don't do, that's right.
correct.
They don't do all the cases, but it is kind of the same model, I think. It would be very different, but it is the same model where the commission got funding for that and then was able to start small, spread it across the state.
Correct.
So we had the entire state covered with multidisciplinary teams. Now they didn't, but they were all getting the feed. So it was one. Anyway, but I think it's necessary that multidisciplinary teams may have a role in all of this that involve different specialties, professions.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, let's turn our attention to the law enforcement one. And the one thing that I want to talk about is the fact that they had an SRO, but there was not an SRO on campus. We heard Mary talk about, they've got one, but wish they had more. And I understand not only is this a financial issue, but it's also a strain on potentially on a local law enforcement agency that's having difficulty because of recruiting and retention. But even if there is one SRO, in my opinion, wouldn't it make sense that if that individual were going to be away from the campus, that there be some attempt to backfill? We've talked about a variety of different ways in the first report, if my old memory serves me correctly. We talked about, I think it was Benton, if I'm not mistaken, and Bentonville as well, where they would, just go drive on campus, just go walk across campus. We've talked about, inviting law enforcement for lunch, having them come up. But let's say, we've got all these training requirements now for school resource officers. So if the training they can't take during the summer, because we can't do everything in the summer, and they have to be away from their school for 2 days, is that school without an SRO is that how we want that to be? My answer to that is no. So what do you guys think? John?
I think our 2018 recommendation that no school campus should be without an armed security presence still stands as even more imperative now in the face of this, a lot of these recent events than anything, that we can't go a day or 2 days or a week or even an hour without an armed security presence on every campus. I would love to, thinking about what the kids said, young adults said a little while ago, I'd love to hear Dr. Hopkins tell us what his kids say about his program. They know that they have armed security on campus. How do your kids respond to that?
I really think it's so baked in at this point that it's a non-issue. I mean, we do have signage on all of our doors and throughout our campus as far as that armed security is present. But as far as it being some sort of a disruption or anything, it's really not that I see at all. But the fact remains that we have one resource officer for our district, which does a lot of good things for us program wise. And he is an armed presence that floats throughout the district. But we're at a point, we have multiple trained and armed individuals on each campus that are there all day long because that's where they work. That's their job. Now, they're not security professionals, so to speak, in the term that, they're patrolling the hallways. That's not what they do. They do their job. But if something should occur, they've been trained and they're ready to respond in that instance.
And I think what I was getting at is, we know police departments are stretched thin like everyone else is. The idea that for Vilonia School District, we got 7 campuses that we could have 7 SROs, even if we had the money and everything else to get them, our police department, our sheriff's department probably could not supply us with 7 SROs and do that for every other district in the county. We've got to stress, in my opinion, we have to definitively declare that there must be an armed presence ready there to meet a threat when it comes on campus at all times.
Well, that was the recommendation. And then just below that was the redundancy recommendation also about, making sure that it's.
Yes, but to me, it's more than just an armed presence. It's an appropriate armed presence. We talked about expanding the qualifications for the CSSO program. So the other big issue, and I'm assuming, and I think if Sheriff Helder is still listening, that would be something that the Law Enforcement and Security Subcommittee would want to look at going forward. And probably the next one too. And that's this whole issue of incident command. There's a policy that the Chiefs Association has that talks about how to respond in an active shooter situation. I'm not an expert, so I want the Law Enforcement and Security Subcommittee to look at that. But also making sure ahead of time that there's not like an MOU because of a school resource officer, but another memorandum of understanding or mutual aid agreement where the incident command is already worked out ahead of time. I think we need to have that discussion as well. And then the last thing that I have, and I need some clarification on this. We've talked about in subcommittees of the concept of the go bag and the barricade equipment that would be in those quote unquote go bags. And we mentioned a ballistic rated shield. Is that the same thing as a rifle rated shield? So talk to me about that.
Go ahead. There's different ratings. Level 4 is typically for that would be defeat a rifle round. Level 3 and below are typically pistol rounds. So there's a lot of departments that have both types. Of course, they're expensive, and school districts or police departments struggle with budget as well. But to give those officers that fighting chance to get inside that room, I think is imperative. So
what do you think that we should be talking about more than just a regular ballistic rated shield? Do you think we need to, what I'm asking is, do we need to specify?
Yeah, rifle rated, absolutely. Rifle rated or level 4 ballistic shield. Absolutely.
Okay.
And that would include body armor as well for the officers, in my opinion.
Yeah, was that on our list? Do you remember?
We've spoke about that. Yes, I think we have.
Well, no, I mean,
on
was it
the
on the list?
recommendations or?
Hold on. I need to find it.
I know that in our subcommittee, that's one of our potential recommendations.
Survey question
survey
is what I'm looking at, because I remember there being three things.
Think it was.
See, I don't think body armor was on there, but I've slept. I actually slept last night. So let me find it. Just bear with me.
Is there a big difference in cost in level 3 and level 4 shields?
About $6,000 to $8,000.
About how much?
$6,000 to $8,000 difference in price of the pistol rated shield versus the rifle rated shield.
Because I want to make sure that we got this right. Is it way in the back?
Dr. May, if I may, I think I found it here. Would you like me to read it?
Okay, here's three of them. I've got, okay, body armor, level 4 ballistic body armor, ballistic rated shields, and breaching tools. Correct? Okay, then we're golden. All right. Okay, anybody else want to have any other comments? I mean, I think if nothing else, there are some huge takeaways. It's just not one thing. It's so many different things. And it's the idea that we've had, from the last time we met as a commission, of having a comprehensive school safety assessment and being able to have accountability for that culture of safety and how important that is. Anybody else want to make any comments on that? I mean, I told you we were going to have a long meeting today.
Dr. May,
Sir?
one of the things I've noticed when I read through here is we've hit on a little, kind of beat around a little bit here, but the kid's friends or acquaintances or peers identified him as a school shooter long before.
Well, that
They
was from
referred
his
to him-
social media
Yeah,
stuff.
well, not just on social media, but his acquaintances in town there. It said his girlfriend, and in page 32 there, I'm not on there anymore, but it said that he broke up with his girlfriend and she had referred to him as a school shooter, or his peers had
Now I
been
know what you're
referring to him as a school
Yes.
shooter. That we talked about the see something, say something a minute ago. What I hear in school from kids all the time is snitches get stitches. And we may need a public service campaign to get rid of that attitude. If we're going to have to see something, say something, but the predominant ideology in kids' minds is that snitches get stitches. We can't tell because snitching's bad. If those kids would have mentioned it to his grandparents or mentioned, I mean, they diagnosed this kid as a potential school shooter before anybody knew, but they didn't report it. Even in a see something, say something state, they saw the warning signs, but nobody else seemed to say it. We need these kids to embrace the idea that it's okay to point out bad behavior, potential threats beforehand, because this happened.
Yeah, but I think it's the consequences. I think it's on the back end, the impact. I think that's where some of the trust comes in. So if it's a situation where a kid turns somebody in, like I think one of them was saying for bullying, and it ends up not being true, and that kid ends up getting in trouble anyway. It's about building that system of trust.
Yes, ma'am.
In those kids. I mean, that's going to be critically important.
I think, though, the other question is let's say in a perfect world that those fellow students did report that, then the next thing is what are you going to do? What can you do about it? You can't arrest him because of what he said.
That's where I was trying.
He's already kicked out of school, or he's already out of school. So there's not really anything the school could do. So go ahead.
No, that's partly where I was trying to go. And I'm sorry, I got an urgent call from my kid and that's why I stepped out.
It's okay.
But so yeah, what is our recourse if you've got a kid? Yes, we should be doing prevention, 10 years early, but when we've got a kid who people have serious concerns about, and I don't know if you all discussed this when I was out of the room, but what kind of recourse is there and what kind of resources are there? Because my understanding of, what we have available in terms of long-term, because a kid like this is going to need longer term intensive treatment. There's I don't know what they would need, but it's not, you're right. It's not going to be 10 days, 10 days in the best mental health, facility in the country is not going to do it. And they're going to need, so I'm talking about, I think this intersects with the work that's going on in the mental health working group. But maybe we need to talk about, recommendations around having significant resources dedicated to the kids with, at the very serious concerns. And I don't know if the law needs to be addressed too. About what you can do against somebody's wishes or even against the parents' wishes. Yeah. Do you hear where I'm going with that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Chief, and if I could address a great question, what can we do? And that goes back to having established behavioral threat assessment teams in the school that look at that behavior. And the course that we took through CGI about behavioral threat assessments, one of the key components is once you receive this information is having law enforcement reach out to that person and conduct a behavioral threat assessment. The Secret Service basically states that just alone having that law enforcement officer walking out and reaching out to that person about this threat can divert that pathway to violence because they've now been outed to a certain point. And then through a result of the behavioral threat assessment, then we look for the resources that are available within the community to provide assistance to that family, to that student or person, to try to, again, the whole mission is to divert the pathway to violence, and that behavioral threat assessment team is a key component in that.
Yeah, very, very good point, Chief. Lori?
So yes, I agree 110%. So if we think about two different types of students here, and you think about this student and this issue's come up and the school team has convened, having the parents as a part of that is about the only way that you'll maintain long-term success, because if you engage them on the front end and they buy into it, they will remain more compliant with the recommendations for treatment, staying in communication with the school and monitoring that child. Sadly, there are a lot that won't. And many of the students that have been referred to my programs for school-based mental health services are displaying some concerning behaviors. Sometimes the parents won't even return a phone call or come to the school. And I have had principals that have said to me, my only way to get the parents' attention is to suspend this kid. Well, that does not help mental health issues, and it just puts that child back into the frying pan, so to speak. So a FINS order is often the only way to get a family to comply with treatment recommendations. And then that tends to go down this whole other path, but that is almost the only recourse. And then who's going to file it? The school doesn't want to have to, but they do. The mental health provider doesn't want to have to file it. The parents can go and seek a FINS order if they want the help and the child is one that they're struggling to control, but that's probably the more rare situation. There are lots and lots of barriers and challenges to getting that child connected to the care and the treatment that they need, because it goes from that 10-day acute stay into a more intensive outpatient treatment with services in the home, community and home-based services. And there's kind of a layered approach there. And if that's combined with the school, that's your perfect world scenario, and everyone's working together. But the chances of that scenario actually happening and working out, my guess is 10% or less. So, I mean, I think there are lots of recommendations that we can make, but you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
Yeah.
And if you've got family members willing to protect someone who's doing stuff like this because they're afraid of what might happen, yes, public awareness of stigma and saying, you know, you may have someone you're concerned about and that's scary. Let us help people before it's a crisis. Let us help people before things get bad.
Right. And we're on the same page with our kids. The prevention piece. Okay, thank you all. Very, very good discussion, and I'm sure we're going to have deeper discussions going forward. Okay. Subcommittee reports. Don't forget, I need your interim report. What's critical on the interim report is to provide as much information about the progress that we've made as possible. It's the detail that's going to be very important, because we have made a lot of progress and we need to be able to demonstrate that progress. And then the other good thing is I've been working for the past week with Dr. Derek Slagle at UA Little Rock, and we're ready, just about ready to roll out the 2022 school safety assessment. So thank you guys for all the work on your questions. I did have to make some command decisions on reworking some of the questions, but we're going to have 92 questions. So I think we've got a very comprehensive report. We're hoping that it could go out as early as tomorrow. And so we ought to be able to get some results back pretty quick, or at least preliminary results back pretty quick. Last time they responded very quickly. We had a 97% return rate. I'm spoiled. I want to see that again. But we're making progress there. Now's the time to start thinking, which I know you have, on developing new recommendations. And for the subcommittees, remember, you know, these recommendations, the new recommendations, you're going to have to be explained to this whole commission. And it'll have to be adopted by the full commission. So we will have to make sure that there is a justification and oftentimes lengthy discussions about any new recommendations. But now's the time for the subcommittees to start framing that. And if there are some that we can bring before the commission next week, I'm all for it. Totally for it. And we might want to start there by having a few new recommendations that we discuss and maybe vote on next time. So having said that, I appreciate you guys have been doing an enormous amount of work and I appreciate it greatly. And we are making progress. So Lori, do you want to give your committee report first, please?
Yes, and we had a pretty long meeting again, but I'll be very brief. We started our meeting with a presentation from Damon Donnell with Springdale School District, and he's the Director of Student Services, and he did an excellent job sharing with us their anonymous reporting system as well as their behavioral threat assessment team. They have been working on with their program and have kind of grown it over the last few years. To this coming year, it will be a 24/7 response for anonymous reports. It has not been that so far. And just a couple of the things I think that stood out to me as well as others, 99% of their reports were actionable. And he said that when they went in, there was that fear of false reporting or people joking or whatever. And they have seen that that has not been the case. And their school is inundated with posters. They use the QR code, they use the website, they use the phone, they texting. There are multiple ways that they can access that. And any person can access the See Something, Say Something logo on the school website. It's on every school device. Community members can make reports, anyone, parents, students, whomever. So it's a really good system. He did a great job of sharing that.
The one thing though, is that it's currently not 24/7.
Right. It will be the next school year, but it has not been so far. But they've been working on that because they did see that was important. They went from confidential to anonymous. No, I'm sorry, that's wrong.
They
That's
went
wrong.
from anonymous to confidential.
Yes. And he said that even though it was per se anonymous, 80% of those reporting chose to identify themselves after and were willing to engage and follow up. So there's a two-way component to that communication, and they get follow-up calls about the report they've made, et cetera. Pretty significant cost. $20,000 a year for the two-way emergency management system, and then adding the 24/7 piece is $2,000 to $3,000 additional per year. And they have 31 buildings, so $23,000 for the year for all of it. They do training in their advisory classes. We talked about all students understanding. They are going to do that this year in their advisory classes, so all students understand the system, what's an appropriate report, what happens when you make a report, that kind of thing, so that the students better understand that. Their behavior threat assessment team, there was a little bit of question about how many of their team members were actually trained. We believe it was just their coordinator was trained, but they did have, they've got a specific list of those that are involved in their team. And he makes all of his media posters, everything in Canva, so it's free. And he was very gracious and said he would share that with anyone that wanted to use those and just change the school name on them. They have the threat assessment or the anonymous reporting information on one side of a lot of their things that they put out. And then on the other side, just different resources and safety information and rules for their school. We spoke about the high reliability school survey. Crystal got us some data to review. We talked about that and just kind of how that worked as a climate assessment for schools. Level 1 on that survey is considered a safe and collaborative environment. There are a little over 1,000 schools in Arkansas. The data that we had that in 2019, 310 schools had 20 or more surveys completed, and then 346 schools had 10 or more surveys completed. So there was, a fair response, not full response as you would hope. But out of that, 17 schools were certified at level 1, meaning they met certain criteria and markers, saying that they were a safe and collaborative school. Talked about what that means moving forward and how we might encourage schools to engage more in high reliability schools work. And then we went into our survey questions and we came up and revised. We had finished our survey questions. We revised a couple of questions to ask some more in-depth mental health access questions. Talked a lot about how students in schools are served by mental health providers and who has access. And we want to dig in and get kind of serious about that because we do feel like that's a need and a lot of schools don't have good access. Then we went into talking about information about all of our recommendations to start on our report, just in talking about the accomplishments thus far. So we talked a lot about each recommendation and what we've done and kind of how we're going to write that. And we made a Google Doc for our report so that everyone can go in and contribute and share information. And we will hopefully do a lot of work toward finishing that up on Friday in our subcommittee meeting.
Yeah, because they're due. Yeah, they're definitely due on Friday. Awesome. Great work, everybody. Sheriff Helder or Chief Hollenbeck? Who's doing it? Oh, Sheriff Helder. There you are. You woke back up.
I apologize for not being there in person today, but my chief keeps telling me that it's almost physically impossible to be in two places at once. And I guess it's kind of coming true today for me. Doc, thanks for, first of all, the students that were there to present it. I think it should give us all hope. They were very articulate in describing their concerns and brilliant, just brilliant kids. So I thank you for doing that. I'll tell you that our last subcommittee meeting lasted for me from Alma to the Oyster Bar in Little Rock. So it was a long meeting. You'll be happy to know that Holly was driving. So it worked out all right. We basically did our rough outline on what our preliminary report through you to the governor is going to look like. We're anxiously awaiting the results of the survey, of course, before we mine too deep down in what our official recommendations to the commission will be from our subcommittee. One of the things that did come up, because we have talked at length about active shooter training, in particular with alert, Dr. Hopkins has made arrangements with Marty Adcock to present at our next subcommittee meeting as an SME, more of a question answer type situation about overall training and how we can further incorporate all of our users, our civilians, CSSOs, or anyway, just a greater utilization of that great training. And I know that you're intimately aware of Marty and what he can provide to us. So we look forward to hearing from him Thursday. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to bring up at this point, but in respect for everybody's time, I think that really does it. Doc, I think you did a great job of going over the summary of the all too painful legislative report from Texas, but it certainly reminds us that we can learn from that and we can do better. So thank you. I think unless some of my committee members have something to add, that's it for me.
Thank you, Sheriff. Really appreciate you and appreciate your leadership. Anybody from the subcommittee have anything to add? Okay, Director Gary.
All right, thank you. So I was on vacation last week. I did
I
not make it to
wouldn't- I
the,
wouldn't admit
I
that.
didn't make it to the oyster bar, but I was on vacation last week. So thankful to Tim for chairing the committee. I was able to, and I appreciate the link to the video that, so I pretty well got through that and caught up with what the committee had discussed, and they worked on the some new recommendations. So we've got some discussions there going that will continue on. And this Thursday, we'll work on the interim report part of that. So Tim, again, thank you. And I'll turn it over to you and see if you got anything to add to what I said.
Super. Okay. Thank you both. Chief Chapman.
I'd just like to say I have not had a vacation over 2 years, so I appreciate you
Well,
bringing that in, sir.
him even bringing it up.
So we had two presentations in our last meeting. We had a presentation from the Little Rock School District on their information sharing technology. Dr. Taylor, Safety Director self, and Marvin presented that platform. Web-based safety monitoring system monitors all devices issued to employees and students. Anyone that uses a Little Rock School District device, this system monitors that. They've been using it since 2011 and is capable of monitoring various platforms such as Google and Microsoft or other approaches. It analyzes emails, photos, chats, or any other document that's uploaded onto a Little Rock School District system. It's a two-tier monitoring system. It does a computer analysis and then a human. They actually put a set of human eyes on it to verify and determining the severity of the issue. They have catchphrases that they can load into the system, so it's very convenient for them and their particular school district. It's a 3-level of notification depending upon severity. So they have a minor infraction and it goes all the way up to an immediate interaction with the student or the parents. They've had some really successful opportunities to employ this system. They had 94,000 documents monitored last year. 807 man hours, and they had 77 events that they identified where they had to take immediate action. So I'd say that's very successful. It's a great use of that system. They do use some other systems for communicating with parents. Some of those more common systems were GoGuardian and Bark. So there's a lot of technology and systems out there being used across the state. They also used a system like we were talking about to monitor social media in particular, and I believe that was called Meltwater. And again, they key in on key phrases or anything that's associated on social media with Little Rock School District. So Meltwater, man. It's a robust system, very well done presentation, showed how easily the program can be utilized at a school district level, but there are costs associated with that, like we had talked about earlier from other reports. So I think it was about $70,000 for school district the size of Little Rock to utilize, but they were covering 16,000 students and staff members, 3rd grade through K-12. I keep looking to Marvin for verification that I'm staying on track with that, but a great program. It was very eye-opening to all of us. And then we went into a cybersecurity presentation by Ray Gerdler, which Courtney set up for us. He's with the Arkansas Department of Education. Again, we probably overlooked the importance of cybersecurity in our schools. He made that very clear to us, stating that 4 out of 10 schools report data breaches, which we know that the schools have huge data files on not only our students, but our parents. So our schools are under attack. And he says that 4 out of 10 is probably being underreported 6 times over. So it's even more important that we understand that. He also talked about recommending IT security audits in the assessments of our schools and the importance of that. That's sometimes overlooked. And we need to have subject matter experts be capable of looking at these assessments and ensuring that we're protecting that data. Overall, cybersecurity seems to be one of the lower priorities in most districts based on Ray's testimony or presentation that day. But it was good for us to know and learn that ADE actually has a response team to respond to cybersecurity threats. We talk about go bags. They have a go bag with a high-speed computer and the capabilities to respond either remotely or on site to address cybersecurity threats and attacks, which was good to know. And he addressed the lack of properly trained technicians across our state. We need a lot of school districts, especially our smaller rural school districts, either have a part-time IT specialist or just don't have enough IT specialists that can protect their infrastructure. And he stressed
And
that
it's not just IT.
no, not just IT, but overall that cybersecurity is just not being addressed appropriately at most levels. And then he also talked about schools are more vulnerable now based on the number of devices that are being used. I think John kind of touched on that. There's more devices out there based on COVID and technology advancements than ever before. So that increases our risk. And then we concluded that with Dr. May making several cybersecurity recommendations for survey questions. And then this week we will meet and finalize our recommendations and prepare our interim report. That concludes
Super,
my report.
great report. Thank you, Chief. Director Kane.
It's Dr. May, the Physical Security Subcommittee met last Wednesday. We started off by doing a final review and making final modifications of our survey questions. And then we moved on to physical security funding priorities.
Which we're not going to discuss today.
Which we're not going to discuss today. And, but it was a good discussion. And then we moved on to talk about new recommendations to consider. And there was, the rest of the time was spent on that. Right at the top of that list were locked doors, both exterior and classrooms. And then there were quite a few more discussed. I added one more based after reading the report that we discussed earlier today. But tomorrow at 1 o'clock, we're not going to meet at 8 like we normally do. It'll be at 1 tomorrow afternoon as we'll finish up discussion on our final recommendations to consider and then work on the interim report.
Great. Yeah, you guys had a great meeting last time. And I want us to formally deal with that list next week in the commission. We can get it approved. Okay. Anybody have any questions on anything? We've had a long meeting. Okay. Our next meeting is going to be next Tuesday, July 26th at 1 o'clock. Like I said, I hope we're going to be in the position where we're going to start talking about new recommendations. And maybe some of those new recommendations can be included in the interim report. Just saying. So I will entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Director Gary made the motion to adjourn.
Second.
Lori Poston, second. Okay, we don't need any discussion. I'll see you guys next week. Be careful. Thank you very much for all your hard work.